Hello, and we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to GE20 classes and enjoy the music. This has been your DJ in the air. Just kidding. I hope you will enjoy the background music to keep you awake and set the mood. Well, today we're excited about discussing the subject, and from this day forward, we will be doing this as often as we can to catch up with the lost time that we had. Looking at the reading materials, it's quite lengthy, very wordy, so I decided to prepare this presentation, and which has really taken me a lot of time to do. But I know this will help in easing out your understanding of the topic to make it a little bit more digestible in that sense. So, relax, grab a cup of coffee. Imagine you are just sitting in a restaurant and enjoying this presentation. So, okay, let's go. Let's begin. Okay, so I decided to discuss the introduction so that we can understand the purpose of the book, why it was written, and why do we have this kind of subject in our curriculum. And this is something new not only for you students but also for all of us. Okay, so even for teachers. Okay, so as with the latest trend right now, the rise of visual culture is one of the critical possibilities in cultural studies. So, because it sounded like a new subject, but actually it's not. It has come from uh, a discussion of different branches of studies. Okay, so with this, there was a shift. Okay, so why do you have to understand the use of the visual? Because um, from the fetishistic, or what we call the extravagant irrational devotion or emphasis on consumption, there was also the rise of the spectacle or the unusual, the notable, entertaining. Sometimes try we just tend to look at the things that are unusual or bizarre. So we have that kind of tendency. And also with the era of digitalization, what a tongue twister. So everything now is digitalized. Then we have the decentering of the individual and their senses. So unless we do something about these trends, there could be. So that's why it says here there was a shift in the uses and understandings of this visual, which reconfigures visuality. So there's a need for us to learn to negotiate to this new world of visuality. So there it is, the introduction to visual culture. At the beginning of the 21st century, there were a lot of plethora of books, journals, conferences, and even university courses suddenly appeared dealing with visual culture. So we thought this is something new. But what is new about visual culture? After all, human beings have always looked at and seen the world around them and made sense of themselves and others through their understanding of what they see. So why do we need a subject that deals with this topic, which is something that has been done in eternity past? Okay, so not only that, writers too have always dealt with the visual world. You talk about the ancient Greek philosophers. I lost the age there. Okay, art writers of the Renaissance, the aestheticists of the early Enlightenment, the art historians, the film critics, and today's media theorists. They have all been dealing with the visual world. So why do we need to learn about these things again? So what's new? So when you say Renaissance, it talks about 14th to 17th century in Italy. It's a transitional movement marked by humanistic revival of classic influence. And when you say Enlightenment, that's already on the 18th century movement. It is marked by the rejection of the traditional, the social, religious, and even political ideas. And there was an emphasis on nationalism, so that's why they call it Enlightenment. So why do we study this? That's a big question. So it presents two reasons, main reasons. Okay, number one is to bring together disparate threads of thinking and understanding across many disciplines. So you notice the picture there, looks funny, but that's actually the analogy for that. Then number two, to make sense of the importance of visuality to what people do and say and how they act in their everyday lives. Okay, so these are our main goals or objectives in that sense. Okay, so our central concern is to make sense of the importance of visuality to what people do and say and how they act in our everyday lives. So let's look at the sight, perception, and reception. So what's the difference between these words? Okay, so when we say sight, it is a natural psychological process, while perception and reception is not. So that's one of the main differences between the two. And when you say perception and reception, it depends on culture, history, and context of what we are looking at, what we know of the world, our own taste, interests, and even habits, which predispose us to see. So we should distinguish the tacit. When you say tacit understandings people have of the visual domain from what we call the visual literacies. So when you say tacit, it means implied, while when you say literate or visual literacy, is something that is a skill that people have developed through the years. Okay, so to illustrate what tacit is and visual literacy, I think you are familiar with these two individuals. So we have Sherlock Holmes, played by Iron Man himself, Robert Downey Jr., and Dr. Watson, played by Jude Law. Okay, so these are the two characters in the movie. Now, when you talk about Dr. Watson, I hope you can relate to this, or at least you are familiar with these characters. But Dr. Watson, their goal is solving crimes, right? But they have different fields. So Dr. Watson is famous for his blindness, because most of the time he doesn't notice a lot of things around him. When he enters the room, for example, he would only see draw signs, carpets, paintings, and windows, and would focus only on the most obvious functions of things, and he doesn't go beyond that. That's the thing about Dr. Watson. But when presented with a sick or damaged body, he would be able to see beyond the posture, the hair texture, or even the color of gums, which is something that Sherlock Holmes is not capable of doing. On the other hand, when we talk about Sherlock Holmes, when he enters the same room, he would observe practices of visual literacy. So what do you mean by that? It means he takes on analytical and reflexive attitude to how and why he might be seeing things in a particular way. He can detect if a crime has been committed by a particular setting of a window frame, or he is able to distinguish even the age, the class, character of the criminal by the way a chair has been moved out of place. It's things like Detective Conan, for example. I know you are fond of that movie, that series, and I too really like the way Detective Conan thinks on solving crimes. Or if you've been watching CSI movies and crime scene investigators, or even so. So based on what they see or around them, they had become very observant and they were trained to interpret those things. So if you are to compare them, what do they have in common? So both of them just not just see physicality of things, but they also see in terms of their interests, tastes, training, and of course necessity. So for example, uh, watching Venus Ra in a Miss Universe competition, some people would bash her because she's not as beautiful according to their own standards, because she's a bit dark and very opposite from what the Westerners would consider beautiful. But the judges have trained eyes. They see beyond those things. They see the beauty of the inner beauty of the person even. And somehow she made it to one of the top spots in the Miss Universe competition. Okay, so the same way, each one of us would look at the same thing physically, but would perceive it or interpret it differently based on these things that we have: interest, taste, training, and necessity. Okay, there are specific visual literacies which allow them to see particular domains and for, of course, particular purposes. Okay, so for example, the ancient Greek philosophers insisted on the importance of visuality for truth and knowledge. So that's why the purpose of this book is to provide trainings, provide techniques for analyzing what we see in its context, from that of the general familiarity or just implying things, that is tacit looking, to the skilled understanding, that is visual literacy. So another purpose here aside from that is to discuss visual culture. According to Nicholas Merzouab, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, it states that visual culture is not just a part of your life, it is your everyday life. That's deep. So visual culture incorporates everything we do. It could include navigating things we see, and I think there's a lot of them. So for example, furnitures, as you can see there in the picture, car posters, paintings, sculptures, billboards, magazine covers, films, television, multimedia, fashion, kitchen utensils even, or architecture. So those were part of what we call visual culture. Okay, but the thing is, it also includes things that are ephemeral in nature or temporary in nature. Now, for example, we have here dreams, optical illusions. I had fun watching that. There's a lot of that in the internet. Okay, hallucinations, spectacles, or grand shows or performances, even patterns or ideas, memories are also even included. Then it also includes creations of human culture, like the patterned, or whether they are patterned or crafted. So they are crafted to either to fulfill a function, for example, like transport, to cook something, or to provide entertainment. So, or to communicate something, like selling a product, providing information or being in contact with others. There are visual things also include things that don't have a deliberate social function or intended meanings. For example, we have there mountains, skyscapes, I mean, rivers or plants. So they don't have a deliberate social function or intended meanings. But sometimes we treat them as messages. Like a rose, for example, could be given for romantic love, or what else? Sunset could tell us that there's a good weather to come. So it could also include caves, medieval and Renaissance paintings, statues, ads, billboards, football colors, or TV shows. So many things that you can see are part of what we call the visual things. Okay, another definition. Okay, visual culture is also defined as a field of study and a set of ways of understanding these physical and social phenomena. So that's one of those definitions, the second definition. So those things now called visual culture were segregated off and studied in distinct disciplines, okay, such as philosophy, aesthetics, astronomy, art history, archival studies. So this is from where visual culture has been extracted. Okay. It also includes new digital communication technology, a term coined by Poster last 2002, and other film studies and media studies. Okay, so the ancient Greek philosophers insisted on the importance of visuality for truth and knowledge. Among them is Heraclitus. Started as early as 500 BC. He says, those things of which there is sight, hearing, knowledge, these are what I honor most. So giving importance and putting sight on the pedestal. Then we also have Plato, 400 BC, or 100 years later. Truth is embodied in what we call the idea, or the actual form visible to the mind. Then after 2,000 years later, we have the development of the Western philosophy. As you can see here, the comparisons between Eastern and Western philosophy. What's the difference? So when we say Western philosophy, it talks about that there is a spiritual reality and a physical one. So they are separate. With the Eastern philosophy, there's only one reality. When with the Western, again, human life is often valued above other life, while in Eastern, all life may be viewed as sacred, not just the human life. So even animal life or plant life are considered sacred. So the divine is apart from material and exists separately from it, from the Western. While with the Eastern, the divine is a part of creation and found everywhere in it. So there's spirituality even among trees. So the journey of mankind is linear according to Western philosophy, while the journey of mankind is cyclical with the Eastern. That's why they believe in reincarnation, for example. And the goal of the Western philosophy is to deal with the problem of sin, immorality, and be reunited with God, while the goal with Eastern philosophy is to deal with the problem of ignorance and in the end to achieve enlightenment. I think parang baliktad. think baliktad yata to. Dalawa. Okay. Moving on. So other philosophers they were still committed to the visual field as a metaphor and a tool for knowledge nearly 2 millennia later. So we have Francis Bacon. He says, objectivity can only be achieved by observation. So something that you cannot observe can hardly be considered objective. So for example, the presence of aswang. So how do you prove that unless you can really provide concrete observations? Then Rene Descartes is, according to him, sight is the noblest and the most comprehensive of the senses. It's clerical error there. Along with Helen Keller. Helen Keller was born deaf and blind. Not really born, but at age 2. Developed a kind of a yellow fever, or scarlet fever that infected his eyes and hearing. But she made an essay which she mentioned that of all the senses, sight is the most delightful of all the senses. Okay, moving on. So even the word theory in itself comes from the Greek word theorin, which means to see. So you see there the emphasis of the visual capacity. So visual culture can therefore be defined not as things, but as a way of thinking, an intellectual discipline for making sense of the world. Okay, so cultural theory in the study of visual culture. Okay, so it has close links with the studies of humanities, which includes a lot of things like architecture, art, painting, sculpture, and other stuff. And the social sciences like philosophy, sociology, and literary studies. So it encompasses a lot of topics. So it is committed to the theorizing of politics and politicizing of theory. That's deep. Okay, so why are things as they are? So they ask questions like this. How could they be different? Sometimes we are afraid to ask questions around us. Like, why are things as they are? I remember when at the height of the ECQ, it's not LTO, the CTTMO, or the traffic management group, were issuing tickets for parking violations of motorcycles parked outside the road. It's already particularly on the sidewalk, but the establishments around the market area in Bangkiroan are closed. So question is, why do you issue tickets when there were no jeepneys traveling or roaming around? Why do you issue tickets for motorcycles parked in the yellow box, as what we call it, since nobody is using the yellow boxes for parking or for loading or unloading purposes? So sometimes we ask questions like this. And I also asked the one in charge of the exit of the market, and I said, sir, why don't you just provide the entrance and the exit on the same area? You just give them a safe distance from each other, because it's really quite difficult for us. If you enter one side of the market and exit on the other end, where you will be carrying a lot of things already to go back to where you came from with a lot of things to carry. So sometimes we ask reasons so that somehow they would be able to evaluate their policies and probably change them for the good. So that's how what they call this, these people ask these questions. So the researchers strive to understand and demonstrate social, historical, economic, and even political conditions that lead to the establishment of structures of power and the struggles for power across society. So these are the concerns of the researchers. These are the topics or the issues that attract them and find out answers to their questions. Okay, a comparison between between a literary scholar and a cultural theorist, as experts on the writings of the novelist Patrick White. Okay, so how do we look at his works? If you are a literary scholar, you would be interested in the meanings of his novels, the possible context of his work, like his style, the content, and the inner world of a novelist would be very attractive for you as a literary scholar. But if you are a cultural theorist, you would locate the novel and the novelist in a context. At what time or place was he born? How was he raised up? What was his upbringing? What was the style of discipline of the family or stuff like that? And he would even analyze that world, its values and its relations. So that's where cultural theory comes in. So here they define reading as a form of visual culture. As a form of visual culture is both active and a creative process. It's not just passive where you just sit down and absorb all the information you get from the reading material, but you have to react to it. So it's an active process. You have to do something with the text so that it becomes useful. So, and it's also a creative process. It allows you to think of new things out of the given information that you had. So when reading the visual, we draw our general and specific knowledges and our personal contexts. So that ends our introduction, and probably I'll be making more of these presentations as the days go on. So we will have the exams probably moved for a few days just for us to catch up with the readings that we have. So I would really encourage you to read the materials that we have so that you can process and prepare yourself for the exam that we have. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll be answering to your emails in a short while. So hope you can interact with me, and probably we can make a group chat. I'll be working on that later, so you can be able to interact with each other. Okay, bye class, and see you on the coming days.